Good afternoon. As Preeti said, we are all really excited to have this session because, all our perceptions and our conceptions of the world really depends on where you're shining your torchlight and spotlight. And, across the world, Muslim women find themselves refracted through the state, the family, male voices, political constructs, and it's very rarely that you get to hear Muslim women and the diversity of Muslim women speaking for themselves. By and large, there's a stereotype around Muslim women that they're oppressed, they're restricted by the structures of the religion Islam, by Muslim cultural norms, and by the states and countries in which they belong. So last year, the feminist upsurge in Iran, the Women Life Freedom movement caught everybody's eye, and that's become the lever within which to look at the diverse spectrum of Muslim women voices across the world. So I'm very, very excited to have this, and I want to first call on stage Sanam Nagrahi Andalini, who is an Iranian feminist who's been working in the conflict zones across 40 countries. She has an organization for conflict and peace management. She's also been responsible for the UN Resolution 1325, which focused on women's role in peace making and in conflict zones. So Sanam, please come on stage. I'd also like to call on stage Fawzia Kufi. I'd like to call on stage Fawzia Kufi, who is the first woman deputy speaker of Afghanistan. She's also the only woman who's ever negotiated with the Taliban in Doha, and she's an Afghan feminist. Fawzia has a fascinating story, which I'm just going to tell you in 2 lines, because when she was born, she was actually abandoned and left out to perish and die. She survived that. And she has grown to then survive several assassination attempts, when she was a political leader in Afghanistan. And as I said, she was the deputy speaker, negotiated with the Taliban, and now is a voice for Afghani women and the Afghan political situation across the world in the UN. And so big hand of applause for Fawzia. And next, I'd like to call up Shiba Aslam Fehmi, who's an Islamic scholar and feminist in India. She's a journalist. She ran a column called Gender Jihad, which is very interesting and is a very important voice for the Muslim women in India. So Shiba, welcome. And I'd like to call Ruha Shadab on stage, who's a doctor, a Harvard Medical School graduate. She moved from being a practicing doctor to public policy, health policy. And Ruha is unique in that she has created an incubator for Muslim women in India to enable Muslim women to take more senior leadership corporate positions and in entrepreneurship. So it's a really unique thing she's doing. Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. So I wanted to start with you, Sanam, because as I said, the women's movement in Iran when Mahsa Amini was killed, the Women Life Freedom caught the world's attention. The Western media and other media described it as this absolute watershed moment. Is it really that in Iran's internal life? And what makes it so?
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here. It's my first time in India, so it's a delight to be here with you. Yes, it is a watershed moment, not because it's the first time that we see in the world that women are leading a revolution. We've seen women in Yemen and Sudan and other places being at the forefronts of revolutions against dictatorships. What's extraordinary about what's happening in Iran is that it is the culmination of 3 generations. So my mother's generation, my generation, and now it's the age of my daughters and younger even, coming into the streets. And what's really extraordinary is that the unifying message is a feminist message: women, life, freedom. It's about women's rights. And what we're seeing for the first time, I think in the history of the world actually, is that men are standing shoulder to shoulder with women, together fighting. And this clarion call of women, life, freedom has unified people across geography and across economic divisions and across, as I say, gender and religion and so forth. So that's what makes it a watershed moment. And when you have 10-year-olds supporting it, you don't change their mind to go backwards. So I think that's why the regime has a challenge on its hands.
So very quickly, Sanam, because I want to bring everyone else in, that at the center of this is the idea of the hijab, and we have this image on screen, which is the stereotype of what Muslim women are really experiencing. So how do you and Iranian women see the hijab, and what is it really a metaphor for?
So a couple of things. If I go back to my grandmother's generation, Reza Shah, the Shah's father, deliberately made the hijab illegal. In 1979, they made the hijab imposed. I think fundamentally what Iranian women, and I would say that I work with women in 40 countries around the world, what we're saying is, leave us alone. We make the choices for ourselves. My body, what I wear, how I deal with my reproductive rights, etc. These are all choices that we make for ourselves. And there are two factors. One is we want to have the right not to just be focused on ourselves, because I think that's a distraction. We want to be able to deal with peace and security and environmental issues and the big issues out there, like men do. And that's my work. And the second thing is that the hijab has been both a symbolic and a physically oppressive garb. Women in Iran have pushed it back over the last 40 years. It started very tight and it's now gone back. But it's also still the tip of the iceberg, because really what matters is changing the legal framework and changing the laws which make me, for example, half a witness in a court, for example, right? So it's really shifting the laws to bring genuine equality across the board.
Right. So I'm going to come back to, if we have time, Sanam, to ask how the state responded to these protests. But Shiba, I want to bring you in over here. Sanam just spoke about how the hijab really is a restrictive symbol, and women have always had this very dialogic pushback on it. But then if someone tries to pull it off you by force, then they, like her grandmother and her mother, have been pro-hijab as well as anti-hijab, which is very interesting. Now, similarly, you call yourself an Islamic feminist and not a Muslim feminist. Why is that, and what's the distinction?
Thank you, Shoma. Well, this is very important. This is the basic foundational question, how Islamic feminism is different from Muslim feminism. And what is feminism stand within the framework of Islam. So Islamic feminism is a very rigorous scholarship-based knowledge project that informs the world, that it is about the reclaiming of what has already been ordained or given to the woman. And we are saying that we don't want anything from the clergy. We don't want any consent or anything. Just want whatever has been given already 1400 years back, when those things were unknown to rest of the society, rest of the civilizations. We want to reclaim that. And within that, there is a lot of radical aspects also, which even the regular Western feminists are not espousing right now. So I'm very comfortable saying this, because there is this understanding that feminism means something very Western, something very alien, something that is not suited to cultural societies. But Islamic feminism is talking about the original divine text, the tradition of Sunnah and Hadith. And from there, they are asking the clergy that I am ready to learn Islam from you, but I am ready to teach Islam as well. So better you don't try to monopolize the religion for your own patriarchal ways. So this is, simply put, it is like this.
So Shiba, I think that's a really important, like Sanam said, that this whole focus on the woman's body, the hijab, etc., forces women to just focus on this, a reductive conversation, rather than be part of decision-making on other things. But it's again interesting that while Iran women were pushing back on the hijab, in India recently, there were pro-hijab protests in Karnataka. So help us understand how the hijab is playing out in India and why are women pro-hijab? And just one question to that is that typically it's very hard for women to fight, because there's the state and then there's the family, there's male, there's majoritarian language. So how do women negotiate this?
The question of hijab in India is really an artificial and political question for Muslim women, because nobody is forcing Muslim women to give up their choice of attire, to give up what they want to wear or they want to remove from their attire. So when the Karnataka hijab controversy erupted, we were really surprised that in India, no woman, whichever community and religion she comes from, has been asked to dress or undress herself as per the whims and fancies of some feminist project or liberal project. So when this controversy came up, we were surprised that how come during the election period, this whole the PFI and the local right-wing brigade, the way they were acting in tandem and creating ruckus. And my question was that why, when you are allowed to wear whatever you want to wear, what is your insistence to wear Arabic style abaya inside the classroom? You can come up to the school in whichever abaya, hijab, niqab, whichever attire you want to use, you can come in that. But inside the classroom, if you don't allow an institution to impose its discipline and its uniform, then what is this whole talk about having a campus and an institution?
So, Shiba, I'm sorry, I'm going to cut you short because I want to bring in the others. There's a very important question there, which is that, a lot of people feel uncomfortable to speak about reform within Muslim cultural practices because you feel then you're playing into majority debates or the stereotype about Muslims. And I'd like you to speak about that. But before that, I want to bring Fawzia in. Fawzia, you were very upset about the framing of this panel. You kept saying that hijab, hair, these are absolutely not the concerns of Afghan women, and yet we interpret the Taliban as being extremely restrictive, and the entire political project of the Taliban is in many ways to control the woman, first and foremost. So why did you not like the framing of the session, and what are the key Afghan issues that you would like to put on the table?
Thank you very much, Shoma. It's a great opportunity to be here. This is my first time after Kabul collapsed, and this is the closest I could get home. I could get to Afghanistan. I came last morning early, and the airport was very emotional because it reminded me of my trips of 4 or 5 times in a year when I was in Kabul. Obviously, I missed those times. Yes, the reason Shoma called me this afternoon that you're my traveled friend, because I was like literally in a fight over the topic of the conversation with her. I agree the way you put it, but I think the struggle women of Afghanistan and the people of Afghanistan are now making is beyond their appearance. It's for the basic human rights. And I think what these extreme governments do, no matter their extreme of any kind of religion, is they retain their power by suppressive measures, by suppressing the nation. If it's an Islamic extreme government or any other government. And therefore, I think, if you ask about your social policy, if you ask about your economic policy, if you ask about service delivery to the nation, you don't see that much, laws and policies approved on that, as you see more laws and more policies on repressive measures. In the case of Afghanistan, it's also so true. Since the Taliban have taken power in August 2021, which we all remember those images, they have issued 36 edicts, only 36, eliminating women's rights, from the rights to education, to the rights to work, to mobility, to their appearance. Obviously, a lot of edicts on controlling the woman appearance. It's not even about that. They suppress women because they think that's an easy object. It's an easy entry point. They create an atmosphere of fear so that they could control their power. And some of these extremist groups, the reason for their existence is that misinterpretation of their religion. In many cases, what Taliban do actually is in contradiction with Islamic principles. Because, for instance, their decision on banning girls' education, that's not happening anywhere in the world. How could you deprive a generation for their gender from their basic Islamic and fundamental rights? And the world is silent. And the whole world is silent because they think it's okay. The governments have that right to suppress and deprive women or population from their rights. I think it's about control, and I think it's about these powers' survival. So in the case of Afghanistan, the moment Taliban try to open up, the moment they try to respect the citizens, they will be dissolved. So unfortunately, women are being used as an easy object. In Afghanistan, our story is beyond hijab. Yes, women of Afghanistan want to have their scarf, but meanwhile, they want to go to the office, they want to go to school, they want to go to university, they want to be able to be respected as a human being. And that is point that is missing in the international arena, which is sad because remember,
Fawzia,
discrimination there could reach to your own borders, as I see it's happening, because obviously if we take suppressive measures, it's like two sides.
Fawzia, I think you're making a really important point, which is common to all three of you, that it expresses itself in different ways, but at the heart of it, this is like trying to push women into a rabbit hole so that they don't participate in life. And you're really like a canary in a coal mine, you know. What's happening with women is symptomatic of much larger authoritarian structures and loss of human rights across a society, you know. I'm going to come back, hopefully we're going to have the time, that there is a stereotype that this is not just about political structures. People have this, prejudice against Islam itself, that even the religion is restrictive. And all three of you have spoken to me about Wahhabi Islam and how worried all three of you are. I hope we have time. I want to draw Ruha into this conversation. Ruha, you've entered this debate from a very different door, which is economic power. You know, you're really worried about how there's an absence of Muslim women across the board in senior leadership positions. Can you tell us how you got triggered? You know, you were a doctor, Harvard graduate. You could have been doing everything else. You come into social entrepreneurship, trying to raise up women who don't have opportunity. What was your trigger?
Thank you for having me. My trigger was something that I realized in my 20s. It was, I did my 2 + 2 is equal to 5, like realizing it was more than these two separate stories much later. And what my 2 + 2 was, I was, I'm the middle child in a family of 2 brothers and a sister.
We're going to run out of time.
Oh, yeah, sorry. And my brothers and I got a lot of education, and my father is a doctor, my mother is a homemaker. And we would still joke at home that we get the brains from my mother. My mother is an incredibly intelligent person who, when we were in Saudi Arabia, ended up being the first Indian woman to win the chess championship in her district multiple times over. But she's also someone who did not complete her high school. And for me, in my head, these were two separate stories. You know, like incredibly intelligent woman, and didn't complete her schooling. And much later did I realize what that really means, right? It's untapped potential of Muslim women that continues to be a challenge in India. And then if all of us aren't contributing to the most of our potential, it's holding the country back.
Right. So, you know, you've shared that this was your mother, that was a personal trigger, but you also found that when you were applying to Harvard, there were no mentors who were Muslim women. So you've incubated about 300, fellows who've got entry now. But you did a survey where, you know, you made women apply to 1,000 jobs. And the survey showed that there was a 47% bias against Muslim women. You know, that if a Hindu woman or any other name applied, you know, and a Muslim applied, that there was a 47% bias in a Muslim woman getting a call back. How has that shifted in the, you know, did you share that data with any corporates or others? How have people responded, and has there been any shifts?
Yes, so people have responded positively to it. So just a summary of the study, we created 2 resumes, Priyanka Sharma, Habiba Ali.
I'm sorry, I'm just, because, you know, don't tell us the modalities. We're just taking your results. How did people respond to that?
So we had a lot of companies reach out to us showing interest in this. And I think that's what was powerful, is we don't talk about the Muslim issue. We don't even call it the Muslim issue. At best, it's minorities or the M word. So putting this out there actually sparked a lot of conversation. We've been invited to several companies to share our findings and to share ideas on how companies can be more inclusive and religiously diverse in our country.
Right. So, you know, very quickly, can you 3 address, I'm going to come back to Ruha with, how it impacted, say, the men in the family when you have helped women pass through the doorway. But before that, you know, this little shard of a thought that all 3 of you have addressed about why is it that there's a kind of general perception about Islam being very restrictive? And all 3 of you have spoken about how Wahhabi Islam is now become the window through which, so tell us about that, Shiva.
So yes, I'll talk about it, but adding to what she has said about the profiling, see, we in India in a very precarious situation. We want to bring in reforms inside the Muslim community, but because of the Islamophobia that is so rampant now in India, every now and then there are calls of Muslim genocide. Even they are calling 20 lakh Muslims have to be killed, etc. So because of that reason, it is so difficult to talk about reforms within the community. It is always, we are in a siege mentality that we are under attack, and we should not be talking, and we should wait for the ideal time. That ideal time never comes. So when are we going to put forward our own issues? That is one thing I wanted to add to that. Now, secondly, what you are talking about Wahhabism is, see, the fountainhead of Wahhabism, that itself is changing now. The MBS phenomena in Saudi Arabia, everyone is surprised at what is happening over there. So this, the Indian clergy find itself at a loss of words even, because they don't know how to talk about those principles or those ideals. For them, the Islamic ideal type was Saudi Arabia, and now Saudi Arabia is changing. So things are changing for good globally. I hope things change good for our good in India as well. And when we talk about gender rights, gender justice, fairness, it is about all the genders, not just one gender. And that is something very important I wanted to underline within Islamic feminism.
Sanam, I asked you about how the state responded to the protests across the board in Iran.
So the state has used fear tactics. This is what they always do. They crack down heavily, then they back down a bit. They back down a bit on hijab at the moment in certain wealthier areas. But they've also used fear tactics, and we're worried about sexual violence in jails, both the practice of it, but also the use and the threat of it. So we've also heard about the poisoning in the girls' schools, and we're wondering why they haven't been investigated. It's been going on since November. So that's what's happening. But I just wanted to just go back to this point about, Islam and what my grandmother was the third of 8 wives of my grandfather. She taught herself how to write. She wasn't taught how to write when she went to school. She became a widow with 6 children under the age of 16 by the time she was 40. And in 1953, she sent my mother to school in England, who was 12 years old. And the letters that she was writing in 1953 were, you have to be able to earn your own living because you don't know what happens to the men in your lives. So you can't rely on men, your father, your husband, and so forth. This is the story and the narrative of Muslim women that exists in all of our societies. We need to do social archaeology to bring these stories back. Because the idea that women are meant to be hidden and not educated and so forth is absolute nonsense. And it is, a lot of what's happened is that the extremism of Wahhabism that was a fringe has become normalized in Sunni society. And in Shia societies, it's Islamist. What we worry about is Islamist attitudes, not Islamic or Muslim, but Islamist, which is political ideology, which is inherently related to the suppression of women.
Right. So, Fawzia, this is a question that I want both Sanam and you and Shiba, if we have time, is there acceptance? So, are you and your voices, would you say that it is symbolic of how, by and large, Muslim women feel? Or is there buy-in in Afghanistan from any large sections of Muslim women? Do they accept the restrictions? Do they feel that that's a part of a culture they want to belong to?
Absolutely not. I mean, this is the narrative Taliban use. They claim that this is our part of religion or our culture. But we know that the society in Afghanistan has transformed really, at least over the past 20 years. And now the protests are not only limited to Kabul, small in number, obviously, not comparing to any other, country. But given the circumstances in Afghanistan, that is enormously courageous, act when you see these women protesting, even in very conservative areas. So I think what they try to link to culture or religion is just to maintain power. And there has always been, in a way or the other, some means of protest. And I think one of the eventual threat to Taliban's existence would be from the women movement, because they know how to fight, but they don't know how to handle the group of protesters. They don't know how to handle this civic, resistance against them. And in fact, you see for instance, my own way, I protested when Taliban first time came. I was in Kabul and they imposed burqa, which is not even Islamic, on women. While in West, they, ban women from wearing burqa. It's about controlling women in any context, any society. I didn't wear a burqa because for me, I never actually spend money to buy a burqa, because I thought it's not even about your appearance. By making you to wear what they want to wear, they want to control your progress. They want to control your, talent. And that is the problem we women across the world have. Actually, by talking about our lipstick, by talking about our scarf, by talking about the color of clothes we have, no matter how strong you are in politics or in art or in journalism or wherever you are in science, they don't talk about that, but they talk about what lipstick you wear, because that way they can target you. And that is our global phenomenon. It's a global fight. It's not limited to Afghanistan. In Afghanistan, we have the extreme form. And that's why I think we all must stand against that extreme, because that extreme can provoke extremism in your own country and can provoke extremism in the West as well. So therefore, it's a response, like reaction. Therefore, we need to stand in solidarity against any kind of misinterpretation of religious beliefs or cultural beliefs on citizens, because that's a global fight we have to stand together.
Thank you so much, Fawzia. You know, we're out of time. We haven't even begun to really dip into all your experiences. But I think it was just like opening a little bit of a window to many other different kinds of voices than what one hears in the mainstream. I just want to leave all of you with a couple of things. Ruha had shared that, you know, from the work she's doing, one of the women who really became a fellow of this incubation program. The fathers, brothers, uncles are the ones who are called to speak at this ceremony. And one of the fathers, who has come from a lower middle class family, he said that his daughter taking the step without his knowledge, entering into a larger world, he said, through my daughter, my world has become larger. You know, that was his tribute to her program. So I think that really deserves a clap. And equally, Shiba, you know, something she's not been able to speak of is that Indian Muslim women are quite ready for reform. And in the midst of a political climate, which is, like she said, not comfortable, makes you feel you're under siege, but they want the reforms. And she was saying, why is it that the obscurantist patriarchy and clergy have to be the ones that the Indian state is speaking to, rather than women like this, who represent the true surge and churn within the community? So,
for Indian Muslim women, this is the best time. Whatever the problems are, but it's still the way we have been able to articulate our own issues. It has never been like that in the times of my mother or grandmothers. So this is the best, and I'm very hopeful of our future in India. Thank you.
On that note, as I said, this is just windows into a very large world. Thank you very much, all of you, for coming here, and more power to all of you. Thank you. You know, Sanam had just said one other thing. She said that the Women Life Freedom movement, despite the huge repression of the state, remained peaceful. And she said, it's strange across the world, 40 countries that she works in. She said, when women lead a movement, it's always nonviolent. They may join a violent movement, but when they lead a movement, it's always peaceful and nonviolent. So more power to women. Thank you so much.
Well, a warm applause. Please, I'll request you ladies to please stay on stage while I call upon Dr. P.C. Sabu, General Manager, SBI, to come up on stage and present a small token of our appreciation to all four of you. Thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for these four women who've joined us today. Thank you, ladies. Like Shoma said, more power to you. Keep the good fight going. Thank you. All right, we're